All right, welcome everyone. So excited to have you guys here today with our amazing guest, Elizabeth Sullivan. And if you don't know Elizabeth, she is an amazing practitioner with yoga therapy, with Ayurveda, with the emotional and energetic component of things. And that's what I'm really excited to explore today is how these things interact. And if you're watching this, if you've been dealing with something for a while, like a chronic pain issue, how a lot of times where the pain is might be a symptom, but there's a deeper emotional or energetic or a deeper root somewhere in the body. And that's what Elizabeth is an expert at, helping us flush out. So welcome today, Elizabeth.
Thanks so much for having me here, Ty. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Happy to have you. I know you do great work in the community and wanted to be able to introduce you to our community as well and just help connect the dots, because I think what we do in our office and what you do, there's commonalities and there's differences. And that's what we want to do, is give people the ability to understand how they can really go deep with their healing.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I've enjoyed, so just a little background on how you and I know each other. We know each other both as practitioners, but I've had the joy of bringing my family to your office, as well as myself. And I really see what you're doing at Whole Family, helping families and kids and parents stay in a more stress-free zone, is such an awesome baseline for anything really we're doing in our life. And I also work from a similar platform, but it's a different entry point to how we go about doing that.
Okay. Yes, yeah. It's great to have your family in our office. We love taking care of your boys, especially active boys like you have.
Yeah, I have four active boys who are often playing sports and getting injured. And sometimes a lot of times for a long time, they were coming to me with their stuff, and they still do, but it's nice to have more allies in the field, keeping them in a state of pain-free, stress-free, so they can be as active as they are. Because it's sometimes nice to just be their mom, right?
Absolutely.
Not necessarily having to troubleshoot the posture or what's causing the pain or perpetuating it. So thank you to you and Dr. Chelsea and now Dr. So your whole team.
Thank you. So tell me more about your approach then, and kind of if someone's watching, like what might be they looking out for themselves to know, like, oh, that could be a good match for me?
Sure. So I work with all ages and with all activity levels. So I have people who come to me who are high performance athletes, and they're really just trying to stay at the top of their game. And what they're like, when I'm working with someone on that angle, it's often a lot about finessing. They do so much repetitive motion at such a high, what am I trying to say here? At a high load, that sometimes they need to back themselves down into more rest and digest state and undo some of the chronic patterns they've been doing to release some of the tension. So in their instance, I'm thinking of two in particular. One who's a really avid bike rider, likes to go for 50 miles plus on a weekend. And he was experiencing a lot of lower back pain, partly because his front line was really contracted and bearing down. And
you can see that with biking. You're in that posture, right?
So that's the habit we need for biking, and we need that habit if we're doing high performance biking. We need that habit to be accessible to us. We need to be able to do it with ease and kind of unconsciously. But when we hold that pattern, when we get off our bike, it starts to create pain in the front line. So this guy was experiencing a lot of lower back pain and then neck tension. And what I'll do with someone like that, because of my training in yoga therapy, part of what I am trained in is somatics, so neuromuscular re-education. And so we're often saying, how is someone habitually using their body? What kind of reflexes are they holding that they need for, like in this guy's case, to be able to ride a bike long distances on the weekend, but they don't need once they get off that bike. And we'll put them in a lower load situation. So in that instance, he was laying down on a table. And ask him to come into that contraction that you need as on a bike, but we're now using gravity different, and we're asking his cortex, the front part of his brain, to wake up, notice the contraction, and start to lengthen out. And that gets it from just saying sit up straight, which most people can't hold if they have that strong of a habit in them, to waking the cortex up, which this is work that your office does beautifully too, waking the cortex up and starting to lengthen out those muscles, that nervous system, and how the brain is mapping the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge especially as an athlete, you're doing that repetitive motion. Mm-hmm. So not only do you have the repetition at a high load, but you have like the desire for it, right? Because you're like thinking about how can I bike faster? How can I do this bigger and better and more? So your brain is just like wanting to be in that pattern all the time, and it can't shift gears to apply to the rest of your life.
Right. Totally. So that strong desire of those like high performance or high peak athletes, you know, I have another one who's an ultra runner and just won Leadville 100 this past summer.
I don't know much about running, but I've actually heard of that in a book that I read. So.
Yeah, so that's up in Colorado, and she was the first female, and she just had a book come out called Running Home. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But the work I've done with her is more on the energetic platform. So she has pretty good form, and we've had to do some things where like to help her stay pain-free. But a lot of hers is like some of the meditations that we've worked with to help her map with her energetic body. So because of the energy work, I'm just giving you a sample of sort of different avenues in. So because of the energy work that I work with is if you think of our body as like a reflection of the energetic patterns we hold, and our body, this dense part of it being like the grossest layer of it, right? The densest layer. The way I've worked with her is helped her give her some meditations where she's literally just mapping like a golden stick figure inside her body and connecting those points from the head through the midline, across the shoulder girdle, across the pelvis, and down the leg bones and out the arms. And when you start to feel all those lines connected, your energy is actually flowing better through all layers of your being, and you can run. And for those of you watching this live, like even just try it sometime. Like try walking or running just as you might habitually, and then try just as you'd trace the stick figure. Imagine it being on the inside of you. Okay. And like a healing line, like a circle around the head, a line down and across the torso, across the shoulder girdle, down the arms, out all the fingers, down your midline, across the pelvis and down the legs and out the toes. And when you start to sense and feel that energetic stick figure, it actually maps all the layers of your tissues, your muscles, your skeletal system, and you're able to hold better posture while you're running or moving about in the world.
Interesting. Because when I'm doing that right now myself, I'm feeling more expansive. And it's just, I think it's so powerful just having the brain aware of the body, and a simple exercise like that, how we get so caught up in today's stresses, and our brain is so worried about everything outside of us and just go, handling everything in the environment. Something so simple can be so easily overlooked.
100%. And it's a great practice to do in the middle of a competition, but also like my boys will often do this before they go to bed at night. Okay. Like simply tracing that stick figure sort of to come back into yourself and get anything that might still be unresolved out for a way to transition from such a waking state to a sleeping state.
Got it. Okay. Beautiful. Yeah, so I see that just like you mentioned with the biker getting stuck in this, it's just helping that awareness. So when the brain can reconnect, I find a lot of people, they start doing these little compensation patterns, and until they look in the mirror or they actually put attention, they're like, they don't even realize how off it might be.
Totally. So that's great that you bring that forward, because that's something that we work with a lot in our...
And maybe that, just to go kind of to the next, so aside from the athletes, people with those chronic issues, if they're not in the athletic state, I know they can still really benefit. So some of those categories as you're transitioning into that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for, I get excited so thank you for keeping me focused here. So our body's brilliant, right? And if we get injured or we're experiencing pain, our body wants to keep us moving. Mm-hmm. And that's where, so I do work with a lot of people who have been injured, not athletes, but just injured because of how they're using their body, or maybe they had a one-time hit, like a car accident or a fall, or something more serious, any gamut, right? Or maybe they've had many little hits of injury or trauma because of how they're seated at work. Maybe they're constantly twisting their body to look at another screen while they're mousing, and that's a functional thing, but it's also keeping them in a state that is causing that twist and turn through the body that can cause unease if it's left there, right? And so what happens when our body wants to keep us so brilliant and moving is, even if we're injured, which, it's pretty amazing that this happens, even if we're injured and we're moving through the world, we'll start to pick up compensatory patterns to protect the injury, mm-hmm. which you're noting that you see in your practice a lot too. Mm-hmm. And that compensatory pattern, while it's helping us in the moment move and do our day, can cause more pain. Right. And chronic pain even. Mm-hmm. And by getting people to get, so one of the major things, and that you're also speaking to, is this first person, third person conversation that yoga therapy, and Soma yoga somatics, which with yoga helps us do. So I might say, hey, Ty, your body's been moving brilliant, and you had that fall, and that shoulder that you mentioned is now coming into the pattern. Let's get a little curious about that. Let's slow you down. Let's lower the load. So I actually have a client that just recently, I had worked with her back in 2012. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to give you a concrete example because I think sometimes that's a little bit more helpful. So I worked with her back in 2012 because she had knee issues. She ended up having a prosthetic joint put in from above the knee to below the knee. Okay. And she didn't have full flexion of her leg yet. So she couldn't fully extend her leg, if you're watching this and you're not sure what I'm talking about in terms of full flexion. And she came and we did a combination of the energetic work and the somatics, leading up into more breath work and some of the classic asana to get more strength. And sometimes we go all the way up to the classic asana if people are interested in that level of yoga. And sometimes people just come to me for how do I re-educate this pattern that's showing up in my body so I can get out of pain and back to my function, whether it's running, biking, working at a desk, whatever it might be, being a mom and moving fast because of the schedule. And so we went to get her out of that pattern, but her body was so brilliant and wanted to keep her moving that she started to develop compensatory patterns up the line. So on the right side was the prosthetic leg, but then a couple of years back, later, she had gotten herself fully extended. She was walking fairly well, but some things were starting to slide in because of how she was using her body and how her leg was responding. And she was slotted for shoulder surgery. I can't say that fast. She was slotted for shoulder surgery. I'm saying that fast 3 times. Anyway, and she said, I really don't want to have this surgery. I've had so many surgeries and I have stuff in me. And surgery can be great. I'm not bashing surgery if you need it. Right. But there's also other ways if you don't need it. Or if you're open to slowing down and re-educating your system.
Especially if it is potentially something compensating, because that's what we'll see is the surgery can help in the moment, but if there was a compensation, now suddenly there's surgery and there's another compensation, and pretty soon there's another, and it just spirals.
Yeah. Yes, so that's where you're seeing people with multiple injuries or multiple compensatory patterns, patterns that keep us moving but actually aren't the way that our body can move with less effort and more ease.
Right.
So I said, are you willing to do an experiment? Like, can we book like 4 sessions and let's just see if we can get you out of pain and back into more function. And, so this person that I work with is really good about doing in between sessions. When I work with someone, I'll give them a home practice, like continue to do these and then continue to look at how you're using your body in your daily life and try to start to catch yourself in those moments of going into compensatory patterns that were brilliant in the moment, but no longer serve you. Okay. So she's a really good student. She goes home and she does her practices, right? She comes in for a session. We get her pain free. She goes home. She does her practices and she starts to adapt, like how she's sitting at work, how she's getting pots and pans out of her drawers in the kitchen, how she's even lifting her gallon of water. And we talk through this in a session, right? Okay. So, my sessions, when I first work with someone, they're 2 hours initially. And then depending on what we're doing and what they're coming for, it's an hour to an hour and a half. Okay. And so we talk through things and we say, like, where is this showing up on other places? And then she works to implement that, right? Well, after our second session, she came to me with her surgery orders and she was like, it was written canceled.
Wow.
She's like, I've been pain free. And I realized that so much of what was happening up in my shoulders was because I couldn't ground into my legs. I was using my whole shoulders to push me up when I was sitting, to get out of bed, to move, right?
Right.
And like, it gives me chills. Like she's...
And to think, right, because not only is she way, like, the immediate benefit is avoiding the surgery and all the other things right? But now she's just so much more connected to her body that she's going to be able to engage in life on a whole new level.
100%. So today I was working with her before I hopped on Facebook Live and she actually refound the footing on her prosthetic, the foot that was connected to her prosthetic. She couldn't ground, she couldn't feel into it, and she refound that. And it transformed her walking patterns already 1,000 times better, but it transformed it in a way that's like super exciting.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And that's what I love is just giving people that ability to have a richer experience in life. And, whether it's for yourself, for your family, for your kids, your grandkids, all those things that if we want to be active into our older years, it's so important to be taking care of ourselves now.
100%. And that's actually something, so the kind of somatics we use is called Hanna somatics.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that term.
So Thomas Hanna was this philosopher who was down at University of Florida. He taught one of the largest yoga classes. And he had the benefit of he's passed away since, left his body. He had the benefit of being able to go study in the medical school. And he started to study neuropsych. And he started to realize we have this sensory motor loop. Mm-hmm. And when he was teaching yoga, he could see that people were sort of plateauing in their ability to get more flexible, more strength, more mobile, right?
Okay.
Because really, that's we want those three. We want to be mobile, strong, and stable in our world. And if we're over flexible, chances are we're having issues. And if we're under flexible, chances are we're having issues, right? And so that stability and strength is really important in that.
Yep.
And what he started to realize is there's a myth of aging. We actually should be growing more brilliant in our body, not less. The longer we're in this body, the more consciousness we should bring forward into our body.
Right. Which makes sense when you think about our mind generally gets smarter with age, right? Because you have more experiences, more interactions, you have more ability to perceive, and with the body, it would make sense that I've ridden a bike, so I know how to do that, right? I've done swimming, so I know how to do that.
Yep.
I can swing a golf club. It should be adding up over the years instead of detracting or withdrawing from.
Yeah, absolutely. And we lodge all that in the lower part of our brain so we can learn something new and novel. But sometimes we have to pull up what we've already learned back up to the front part to say, how can I get more mastery with less effort?
Right.
Which is really countercultural.
Mm-hmm.
I came into this work because of my own healing journey in terms of I had been raised like go 110%. And if you're not 110%ing it, you're probably not, being super successful. That more was more, right? Like, and through that, like I got pretty depleted. I ended up in a pretty chronic stress pattern. I had some trauma in my background. And the way it expressed, so Ayurveda, which is the sister science to yoga, it's the art of healing or longevity through our daily rituals and lifestyle. And, we're all doing routines. So, like, how do we do routines that actually support us, right? I mean, I'm still working on this, but through, which you can attest to, you see me on every couple of week basis.
We're all working on it. I'm included in that.
So in my body, the way Ayurveda looks at it is like everyone has a weak spot, can have a weak spot depending on how we've used our body in this lifetime or other lifetimes, because they take the long view of consciousness. And depending how you're using, what's happened, you might have a weak spot. So it will go into like, if you're depleted, the depletion can go into a weak spot. So in my case, it was my hair and I got alopecia. And, because I was curious about the root of my alopecia, which is what Westerners call unexplained hair loss, it led me through all these paths of like, how do I gain more effortless ease in my body? How do I reduce the stress response? How do I start to nourish my tissues? And, my hair has started growing back. It's not all the way back. I'm hopeful for that someday, but if not, I'm also in a, more and more self-accepting of myself and more self-compassionate, right? Which also helps the healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say, as a lot of people watching this, I find at least when they come to our office and probably to you too, they've explored other options first, because it's, easy to go down that mainstream route. Or what would some of the things people that you help tend to have already tried?
A lot of times people have already tried massage, PT, acupuncture, depending on the type of chiropractic. Sometimes they've already tried chiropractic.
Yep.
And Western medicine. And it's not to say there's nothing, wrong with all these approaches. In fact, like, I welcome partnering with people on this. Right. But sometimes they've tried it all and they come in and they're like, I'm not sure what to do next.
Okay, yeah. And that, because I could see if it's sometimes when it's maybe the acute or easy to fix thing, then it is easy to look at the shoulder's hurting, look at the shoulder, do something, and it works, right? But when it becomes a chronic issue, there's, like you're saying, these compensation patterns, and the shoulder issue's up here, but if you layer it back, it started from whatever it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, so I could see the complicated case really benefiting from your approach.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, like, as you were layering it, it reminds me sort of like the shoulder might be the tip of the iceberg, right, but there's the whole iceberg underneath the water that you don't see.
Right.
So it might be the thought patterns that now have settled in of what I can and can't do because of my shoulder, right? Or because of my hair, or, insert what that is for someone. Yeah. So sometimes it's even doing a little bit of someone looking at their thought patterns, right? And how do we interrupt that cycle of I can't do this because of this? And then what can someone do? And that's really where that sensory motor re-education piece comes in, to get people self-sensing, back in here, as you said, like I might say, see if you can elevate that shoulder to your ear. And someone might go to do that. And at the same time, they might bring it forward. And I'd say, oh, curious, you're moving in two different ways. Right. Did you notice that? Well, no. That's how I always move, right? And then we start to clear up a pattern that they've been using. We want to be able to move in lots of different ways, but sometimes when we are over-efforting, it can cause us unease.
Definitely. That's a crazy thing when with some of our trainings, the teachers have talked about how the brain is spending up to 90% of its energy keeping us upright and moving in space and moving against gravity. And so how we move, the brain's spending so much energy on that because that's one of the top priorities. That's why, like, a little kid that's starting to walk, they step on any little thing and boom, down they go, right? Because the brain's not efficient at it yet. And
right.
So to think of, even as adults, that we can actually become less efficient in something that we should be becoming more efficient in and getting better with over time. And if those patterns start to happen where I think I'm going this way, but I'm actually going forward, like, no wonder things can show up if the brain isn't able to connect and run those patterns. And what we'll see then is because those movements aren't running well, now the brain's putting more energy there, and it takes it from digestion, or it takes it from your mood and your focus. It takes it from your ability to sit still, your immune system, your sleep, all these other things. And so then we see that trickle-down effect into so many other areas in life.
Yeah, that's where your visual scans that you do are brilliant, because it is showing that, right? It's showing, like, oh my gosh, the body is using so much energy, not at the core of it. And when I say core, I think we're probably speaking similar, but in case anyone's watching, like, the core being that the front of the body, the back of the body, the side, the pelvic floor, and the top of the diaphragm. So our brain, actually that sensory motor loop that maps our brain, it actually only gives like this much room to the trunk. And that's a pretty large landscape. Yeah. It gives a lot more attention actually to the hands, the face, the genitals, and the feet, because it's wanting to keep us safe in the world, and it's how we put out our actions, our imprints into the world, right? So if I'm reaching toward a hot flame, I want more sense awareness on this hand than I want in my trunk, because my hand's going to hit the hot flame first, right? So we work a lot coming back into the core to get people more connected and more mastery here, and then back out to the peripheral.
Got it. And that makes sense. It's like a tree. If the trunk is strong, the branches can be strong.
Yes.
The branches can't be stronger than the trunk, or if the trunk's going one way, all the branches are going to go that way too. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and we want to stay upright, and like you said, our body uses a lot of energy for us to stay upright, right? And so if we have a compensatory pattern of like being over our bike, I'm still going to bring my head up because I want to see the horizon.
Right.
I want to know where I'm going and know where I'm looking. So now I've added a secondary pattern, right? And so by actually coming back to the trunk, I get to start to release some of those secondary patterns that might be showing up.
Yeah, and that's why now you can have a better mood. You can have all the other things that go with it, which is so fun to see in people.
It is really fun. People become more resilient and happier, and they want to eat better, or they might get better. You know, the person that I was talking to about the canceling her shoulder surgery, she's like, I am sleeping so much better.
Right, and you just start that upward cycle of health, and I find a lot of people, they're working so hard to get their habits in, of get their workout in, eat well, drink water, but their body is just struggling internally. It doesn't have the extra space, the extra energy to do all those things. So once you can break that pattern from this to this, now the brain's like, oh, sweet, I don't have to spend so much energy there. Now, okay, tell me what we're doing. Oh, we're eating vegetables today? Okay, great, I can do that. We're going for a run, whatever it is, right? It actually frees up the opportunity for it.
Absolutely. And we actually work with those 6 pillars that you started to list there, which is a lot. So the 6 pillars that we work with in yoga therapy is, you know, have you rested yourself, slept? How's your sleep?
Okay.
How's your food? How is your movement pattern? What are you doing to move or exercise? And that can be anything. It can be walking, biking, dancing, shoveling, whatever, insert, right? And then those first 3 pillars, if those are in place on a regular routine that's actually nourishing of the body gets to stay in a state of self-healing. But if some of those contractions of the body are in place, it's hard to even do those first three. Right. So it's sort of like we're playing with both ends, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I see you guys doing that too at Whole Family. Like we're playing with both ends. Like, can we get the body more functional and back, out of those patterns, whether it's a tight lower back or a tight upper back or a twist or a torque,
right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then can we get into these like pillars of, have I fed myself? Have I rested myself? Have I moved myself?
Yep.
And if those are in place, then naturally the next three pillars show up, which is like, I'm breathing is better, stress management is better, because my body knows I'm going to constantly do that and it stays in the state of self-healing and self-ease. I'm able to do more of the internal cleansing. So, keeping my GI tract freer, eliminating on a regular basis. And then self-awareness and meditation is easier. Some people try to go and do some self-awareness or meditation, but if you sit down and you're hungry or you haven't slept, or you haven't moved your body, you're already at a disadvantage on that chair, mat, floor.
Yeah, like the hierarchy of needs kind of thing, right?
Right.
If you're not being fed, you don't care about the spiritual enlightenment aspect of things, right? You gotta prioritize. Put some food in my belly first.
Yeah. And I know I fall down in those myself,
right.
so especially as the seasons shift, I'm like, sometimes I need to bring myself back to some of those practices.
Absolutely. I think it's an ongoing process, especially in today's world. So,
yeah.
Okay. Well, wonderful. As we wrap up then, I think you gave us a great overview of, the length of the sessions, and I like that you're starting with a piece that's foundational for the body, that then now makes those other habits easier, and that you give homework for people, which is great.
Yep.
So they can be taking charge of their health at home. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
So best way is people can either email me at emesullivan at gmail.com, or they can call me at 651-270-0660, or you can go to my website, which is www.elizabetheilerssullivan.com.
Perfect. And we'll put all those in the comments below so you don't have to memorize them.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. No, it's great.
Facebook Live is new to me, so thanks everyone and thank you for inviting me too.
Absolutely, yeah. It's great to have you as a resource for our practice members in our community, and appreciate what you do for everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always trying to work myself out of jobs. So I like to partner with people and get people functional and healthy and happy and better energetic patterns and back into their life. So
absolutely. Beautiful. Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Great time with you today. And
great to be with you.
Thank you, everyone out there. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Facebook Live.
Bye-bye.
Bye.